Hello, hi everybody. Hi, my name is Charity Bourne. As we're having other people join in, I'm going to go ahead and go over some housekeeping and a little bit more about what our webinar is going to cover and how it's going to work. This webinar is created by Elim Bio, my company, and it is going to be recorded and it's going to be posted later on YouTube. So as you are listening to the webinar, just keep in mind that all your questions could later be on YouTube. I'm not going to be saying your name if you ask a question, but it will be later included on YouTube. And there is a Q&A section on the very bottom of your screen. So you can go ahead and type in a question at any time, and then you can have that question shared with our special panelists today. We are very honored and excited to have our panelists. We have this webinar series that was created. It's called Getting to Know Your Scientific Community, and it's sponsored by my company, Elim Bio. Elim Bio is busy supporting researchers on the front lines, and we're proud to say that we're helping scientists solve the problem of COVID-19. During this unusual time, we really wanted to make sure to reach out and feed future curiosity of our future scientists. And we felt the best way to do this is to give you at-home students a chance to meet some of the cool scientists in our community. To paraphrase Mr. Rogers, in times of uncertainty, look for the helpers. There are always people who care and are helping. Knowing there are amazing helpers help us feel a little better. I'm very honored to welcome our special helper and panelist, Dr. Michal Tal. Dr. Tal has her PhD in immunology from Yale. She's a current instructor and team lead at Stanford University. I've been lucky to watch some of her prior trainings online, and she's an expert at providing scientific information to her students. Dr. Tal is passionate about furthering our detection, management, understanding, and treatment of infectious disease. The research she does in infectious disease helps medical care to achieve better health outcomes. And now what we've been all waiting for, Dr. Tal, I'll go ahead and give the floor to you.
Hello, everybody. I am really excited to talk to you guys today. My name is Michal Tal, and I am going to be talking to you guys specifically about this question of the fact that kids seem to have superpowers against coronavirus, and we're all trying to figure out how you guys have this all figured out. So I'm going to tell you guys what we know, and then maybe in the questions and answers, you guys can fill me in on how you guys are doing this. But it's pretty amazing stuff. So these are pictures of me at work. And one of the things that you're going to notice, if you see me in the little window in the screen, is that I'm not wearing my normal clothes when I'm in lab. I'm wearing something over them. So I'm wearing a lab coat, I'm wearing a mask, I'm wearing goggles, I have my hair back. These are all different measures to try to keep myself safe when I'm working on different bugs that are trying to get into my body. And on the left-hand side, you can see how we work with some of the really scary stuff when we just need to keep ourselves contained with our own air inside, so no air can possibly get in from the things that we're working on. So if you see the things that we're protecting, you see that some of the stuff we're trying to hide there are our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our hands. And that's because, especially our eyes, nose, and mouth, these are really great entrance ways into our body. And that's the way that a lot of bugs like to get in, like coronavirus that we're going to be talking about. So first, I want you guys to think, I know I can't hear you, but I want you to take a guess, say it out loud if you can. Do you think germs are good or bad? So think about that. I know a lot of us tend to think that they're bad, and some of them are. Some of them can hurt you and cause disease, but a lot of germs are actually really good and really important for you. So the most bacteria that you have in your body they're actually there to help you digest your food. They're there to keep some of the bad bugs away. So a lot of them are actually helping you. And it's, but we're going to talk a little bit more about these bugs that can make you sick. So your body is not just one thing. It's a lot of tiny little units that work together and serve different purposes. Now, your body is made up of a ton of different cells. Each cell can do different things. So you have cells in your eyes that can take in light, and help you put together a picture of what you're seeing. You have cells in your skin that can keep everything out and keep you safe. You have cells that can make hair. You have all sorts of different cells in your body. Now, bacteria are one type of germs that we think about. They are a cell. They're one cell. The whole thing is one cell. A virus actually doesn't fit our definition of being alive. And one of the reasons for that is it actually isn't a cell. It actually needs to get inside of your cell in order to do what it wants to do. And I don't know if you guys have ever met anybody who's really bossy, but that's kind of what a virus is like. So a virus gets in there and it starts telling your cell what to do, and it kind of turns your cell into a factory for making lots and lots of viruses. And I don't know about you, but that's not what I want my cells to be doing. I don't want them to be listening to some virus and just letting that virus take over and have them make a bunch of stuff that they're not supposed to be making. So if we look at what these things really look like, this is what a bacteria looks like on the outside. So it's got this cell wall on the outside, and on the inside, it's got this stuff called DNA, which is like a recipe book for making all of the different proteins and all of the different cells in your body. All the information on how to do that is in that material called DNA. Now, viruses have that material too. It might be in the form of DNA. It might be in the form of RNA. These are different ways that that recipe book can be written, but they have a recipe book of exactly what they want your cells to make. Now, you've got a pretty big recipe book full of DNA and full of the machinery to make that DNA into proteins and to make everything that you need for your cells to work. So if we look at how big a bacteria would be in comparison to one of your cells, there on the left corner, you see it, it's actually really quite small. But a virus is even smaller than that. So a virus is really, really small inside of your cells, one virus. So the thing is, if you guys have tried to spell stuff, spell out different words or write notes to each other, if you're trying to write stuff down and really be really good, copy every letter exactly as it should be and make the word exactly as it should be, you know that takes some time, right? So it takes some time to write everything down just right. Like we would want to have in a recipe book that's got to carry all this really important information. But sometimes you write stuff down really fast and you make mistakes. You might make some spelling mistakes. You might miss a word. So the thing about viruses is that a lot of viruses make mistakes. When they try to copy themselves in their recipe book, they do it so quickly, super, super fast, that they end up making a lot of spelling mistakes in there. And we can actually use those spelling mistakes to see what virus came from where. And maybe if you guys have more questions about that, we can talk about that in more depth later. But this is just kind of a slide to show you guys that the smaller that recipe book is, the quicker it's usually copied over and the more mistakes are generally made. So coronavirus actually uses RNA for its recipe book. And you can see in the yellow there where it says RNA viruses, they're actually pretty high up in this graph, which means they kind of make a lot of mistakes that we call mutations. Here, I'm showing you some pictures of what some real viruses look like with an electron microscope. Now, viruses are so small that we can't see them with our eyes. We can look and look and look, but we're not going to see them. that doesn't mean they're not there. And it's kind of funny because a lot of people right now are very afraid of this coronavirus, even though it's so small we can't see it. So it's kind of a funny thing to be really, really scared of something that's really, really small, but it can be scary. And so what you're seeing here are electron microscope pictures. So this is a way that we can take pictures of stuff that's really, really tiny. And what you're seeing on the left is actually a really funny kind of virus. This kind of virus infects bacteria. Do you remember how I said you've got this big cell and then you've got a bunch of bacteria that help you digest stuff, so your whole body, it's like a whole solar system for these other, it's like a whole ecosystem for other things, because you've got all these bacteria in you, and those bacteria have viruses in them. So the viruses on the left, that's a virus that infects bacteria. The virus on the right, I'm showing you a flu virus. So there's a cartoon on top, and on the bottom, you see, you can see that recipe book inside. You can see that genetic material inside, and you can see that on the outside, there's all these proteins that help it get to the cells it's trying to get to infect. So this is one way of looking at a flu virus. You can use a different way of taking these pictures with a different type of electron microscope, and you can see what the outside looks like. And you see that the outside has all these proteins that help it stick to our cells and help it get into our body. Now, what I wanted to tell you guys about, a little bit more about, is coronaviruses. And I wanted to tell you guys about this amazing woman here. So her name was June Almeida. And in this picture, this was before she became Dr. Almeida. So that happened a little bit later. But she took this picture that you're seeing on the right. And this was the first ever picture taken of a coronavirus. And you know where these coronaviruses came from? They actually went to a school in a place called Surrey, and they took nasal washings. That means they did a little squirt into somebody's nose and collected out everything that came. And one of these kids, one of these students at this school, his nasal washings had this virus in it, and it was a virus that she had never seen before. So she was really excited. She took these pictures and she wrote this paper about it. And actually, some people thought she'd taken a bad picture of the flu virus, which was really unfair. And it took her a couple more years to prove to everybody that this was a new virus that we just hadn't known about before. And it got the name coronaviruses because it looks like it's got that crown around it. So that's why it got named coronavirus. Now we know there's lots of different types of coronaviruses. And what I'm showing you here is just a little kind of cartoon of the virus. And you can see that it's got these spike proteins on the outside that make up that crown. And this is what helps it get into our cells. Those spike proteins bind to one of our cells and let it get in. Now, what got really tricky is that when this new coronavirus that came out in late 2019, it got a name for the virus, and it got a name for the disease that the virus causes. So that's caused quite a bit of confusion because this one thing has two names. So if we're talking about the virus, then we call it SARS-CoV-2. The reason we call it SARS-CoV-2 is that we've already had SARS-CoV-1, which was very, very similar to this. It caused slightly more severe disease, and it wasn't as good as spreading people to person, but otherwise in many ways it was very similar. The disease that SARS causes, that the way that people are getting sick from this, that's named COVID-19. So that's the name for the disease because it's coronavirus disease. And it was first identified in 2019, so at the very end of last year. So one big question that a lot of people have been asking is, can kids catch SARS-CoV-2? And if they can catch it, can they spread it? And can they get the disease? Because it really doesn't seem like kids are getting very sick from this. They're certainly not getting the most severe they're not getting really, really, really sick from this. And so that's been a big mystery. So let's take a little bit more of a look at that. So one of the things that you're seeing here on the right is you're seeing a person. This person is really tired. They seem to have lost their sense of smell. Nothing smells anymore. They've maybe had a fever. They've maybe had a cough. Maybe it's a little bit hard to breathe. Maybe their stomach was upset. Maybe they felt like nauseous or suddenly had to go to the bathroom really badly. So these are all different things that you could feel if you get a case of coronavirus. But what's been really interesting from the beginning of this is that kids actually can get sick from this. They can catch SARS-CoV-2. They can get mild cases of COVID-19. But the symptoms seem to be a little bit different than what we're seeing in adults, and they seem to be much more mild. So kids are actually more likely to get these upset stomach kind of feelings than adults even are for this. So I'm going to show you this graph. Now, this graph has 3 different things that we're looking at. So we're looking at how many people are getting hospitalized, and it's broken down by age group. So everybody under 19 is in that first top bar, and then everybody, all the other age groups are in the bars going down. So we have who's getting hospitalized and needs really, really intensive care. So they need a lot of help in order to get through this, and even who is dying from this. And what you're seeing, so this is a graph that was made by our CDC. What you're seeing is that the people under 19 years old just are not really getting very sick from this. They're hardly even having to go to the hospital. And if they are going to the hospital, they're really not needing a whole lot of help, and they're recovering and they're doing okay. So my big question to you guys is, what is your superpower? And we're going to talk a little bit about what makes your immune system special. And that might have some of the answers, but this is now a big question everybody's trying to figure out. So we know kids can get SARS-CoV-2, and we know that you guys can spread it. So one of the things that now we're trying to figure out is, how do we spread it? So how do adults spread it? How do kids spread it? So one thing, if there's one thing I teach you in this whole webinar, it's that if you do cough, you don't want to cough like the little girl on the right. And the reason you don't want to cough like the little girl on the right is that if you cough into your hand, and now you've got all these germs on your hands, and now you touch a door handle, the next person to touch that door handle after you is getting a nice dose of germs. And if they touch that door handle and then they pick their nose or they stick their hand in their mouth, well, they could get sick from that. So that's why when we cough, we really want to use our elbow. So we want to cough into our elbow and try to prevent the cough from just going all over. Like you see the 2 guys on the upper left, they're just letting that cough go. Oh man, it's spraying everybody around. So we definitely don't want to do that, but we also don't want to get it on our hands and spread it around with our hands. So we really want to just try to cough into our elbow if we can. Now, some other problems is that we get this stuff on our hands, we touch our face, we touch our nose, we do all sorts of stuff, and then we touch other things. Now we've got these germs on our hands. So one of the things that we're asking you guys is to wash your hands a lot. And we know that hands get dry and you've got to moisturize, and it's not that fun, but it's one of the best ways that we can really try to minimize people spreading this around to each other. That, and really just staying at a distance from other people so that you're not close enough to cough on other people, or even just when you're talking, you can have viruses coming out. So if you give people a lot of space, and if we stay home and if we don't get too close to other people, then we can really minimize that. So one of the things is that we touch stuff that other people touch. So So we've got to be really careful about washing our hands. But I'm showing you something else. On the right-hand side, I'm showing you a toilet. And I'm showing you what happens when you flush that toilet. You don't see it, but remember how we talked about how scary some of the things you don't see can be? When you flush a toilet, you can actually get little particles spraying up into the air. And this is something that we're a little bit worried about because we know that people can have viruses in their poop. And I know that sounds kind of gross, but we don't want to have the ability of those viruses to get out. So one thing that we're asking people to do also is to actually close the lid of the toilet before you flush it. And that can really help reduce the spread of these things from just being in the air in the bathroom for the next person to walk in there and breathe it all in, or to get on your toothbrush or something gross like that. So why does washing our hands work? How does washing our hands destroy these coronaviruses? So what I'm showing you is that the coronaviruses have that spike protein, but under that outside crown, there's actually an envelope layer. You can think about it like the kind of envelope that you open a mail, but this envelope wraps a virus. Now, soap bubbles are really great at getting in there and busting that envelope open. And with an open envelope, the virus isn't good anymore at getting into your cells and bossing them around. It's done. So that's why washing your hands is really, really great for getting rid of these coronaviruses. And the other thing that you can do if you don't have soap and water is you can use ethanol or other hand sanitizers to get rid of that virus. So one thing I want to talk about is a lot of people have been asking, is this going to get any better in the summer? Is there anything that we can do to protect our bodies? And I want to explain a little bit to you about mucus and how you have a mucus layer throughout your body that's actually there to help you fend off viruses like this. Now, mucus is a word we don't use that much, but I think you guys have all experienced it in one way or another, because sometimes it comes out of your body and not just stays inside. We have all sorts of funny names for it. But let's just say runny nose is one way that you've seen your mucus and thought about it. Now, is mucus good or bad? Well, that's a really tough question. And a lot of people for a long time thought that it was bad because it could give you a sore throat, it could get you all stuffed up, it could do a lot of things, but we also realized that it was really good. And so I want to give you guys an example of a long time ago when bacteria used to be really, really scary, and getting a bacterial infection could get you to the hospital. A lot of bad things could happen before we had good drugs against bacteria that we have today called antibiotics. And it's actually really important that we get new antibiotics because bacteria are starting to get a little bit scarier again now that a bunch of them have managed to become resistant to antibiotics. But the guy I'm showing you here, he is the guy who discovered antibiotics. So his name was Alexander Fleming, and he changed modern medicine as we know it because he managed to find this class of drugs that could kill bacteria. It could kill a lot of different kinds of bacteria. But what was really cool about his story was that his story starts long before he discovered antibiotics. He actually discovered that mucus was good, and he discovered one of the ways that mucus helps you fight off bacteria. And what happened to him actually is that he had a runny nose, and that runny nose dripped into a petri dish. You see all of those petri dishes, he had them back there. And this is when he was young on the left-hand side. And he saw that when he put that in the incubator and he marked the spot where it happened, he looked at it, he saw that bacteria weren't growing in a circle around where that mucus had dripped. Well, why is this mucus so special? What's it so important? Well, he discovered what protein it was in the mucus that was killing the bacteria. But our body uses mucus to to kill off a bunch of different types of bugs and to keep them away. So I'm showing you guys here in blue. Do you see the guy on the upper left? Everything that's drawn in blue is covered in a coat of mucus. So it's these mucosal membranes, and there's mucus on the outside of them. And I'm showing you on the upper right, these cells that you have that just keep moving that mucus along. That mucus is important because it helps you keep everything moist. And these cells, they need to stay moist. And that's one of the reasons that when we have higher humidity inside or outside, that it's bad for the viruses and it's good for us because it helps us keep everything moist, keeps everything protected. And that's why sometimes you might see your parents using a humidifier in the winter in the house to keep the air nice and humid. And we'll also talk about other ways that you can try to humidify your insides so that you can best protect yourself against these kinds of viruses and bacteria that you get in through the air. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how your immune system recognizes germs. You have an immune system that is there to protect you. So you have skin cells and you have that mucus on the inside. That's all there to protect you. But you also have a special system of fighting cells that are constantly on the lookout for invaders, and then they're coming in to protect. So you see the little germ guy, he's in there to make trouble. And you have cells that we call dendritic cells. I labeled them here, DCs. They are there to constantly look for these bugs. They look for these germs, they take little pieces of them, and they go and they show them to these specialized cells called B cells and T cells. B cells can shoot out antibodies, kind of like darts, and they can really help to protect you, and they're very important for these different viruses, especially for coronavirus. And also T cells are really important. So T cells can actually kill infected cells and help to keep you safe so that those infected cells can't just make a ton of virus. So, and they can do that by actually poking holes in them. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So these are these cell types like dendritic cells, macrophages. These cells are constantly on the lookout for bugs. This is what they look like on the left. This cell has found some bacteria and it's caught it. On the right, it's found some yeast. So different types of germs, but they're eating them, they're capturing them, they're getting rid of them. They're going to display them to B and T cells. I'm going to show you here. This is a T cell in this kind of teal color, poking holes in this yellow infected cell. So how do vaccines work? Like the flu vaccine or the coronavirus vaccine that we're trying to make, how does that work? It works by training your immune system, trains your B cells and your T cells to know what to look for so that when you do see it, you're ready to go. Because it actually takes a while to make these responses and to get your T and B cells ready. So by having a vaccine in advance, you're ready for whenever you see this thing and your body's ready to go. So what are scientists working on right now? Well, a lot of people are working really hard on trying to make a vaccine. And it's not yet clear exactly how you'll get those vaccines. I don't know if you guys have had different types of flu vaccines in the past. There used to be one that you could get sprayed in your nose. It hasn't been available in the last couple of years. There's also the types you're more familiar with where you get this shot in the arm. But these vaccines are there to protect you and to train your immune system so that you are capable of fighting this stuff off without getting sick and without spreading it to other people. A lot of scientists are also working on making medicines for this disease so that people who have gotten the virus and are getting sick and going to the hospital so that we can help them get better. And the other thing that scientists are working on is to make better tests. So we really want to get a good idea of who's infected, who's contagious, and who's immune and no longer contagious. So these are things that we really want to understand and get a better sense of. And I'm sure you guys all want to know if you've been infected or if you're immune as well. So what I want to show you is how these vaccines work and how what you guys have been doing. I know this probably hasn't been that much fun, being stuck at home and staying away from people. So we're calling that physical distancing. You might have also heard it called social distancing. But you actually don't have to social distance. You can call grandma and grandpa by Zoom. You can talk to people on the phone. There's a lot of things you can still do to be social, actually. But maybe you're seeing people on Google Classroom, but we have to physically distance from other people so that we don't get them sick. The other thing we're trying to do is we want to figure out how to use community immunity. That's the same way that we use a vaccine. We get enough people immune that they can protect everybody and prevent this virus from spreading. So these are showing you these 3 different things if we don't have a population that's immune at the top and we don't physically distance. You see that spread happens really quickly. And while some people will go on to become immune, some people will actually go on to die if we do it that way. And so that's really, really, really scary. And that's not the way we want to do it. We're doing right now the one in the middle where we're not immune, but we are physically distancing. And because people are further apart from each other and not as likely to get everybody sick, we can really minimize how many people are getting sick. And so that can really help us a lot. And at the bottom, that's where we want to get to. So what we really want to get to is where we've got a safe vaccine that we can give everybody, and then we can have a lot of people who are immune without ever having to have gotten sick and be scared that even worse things are going to happen and that they might not recover. So there's a lot of things that you guys can do to stay healthy, and I know that it's hard when you're stuck in isolation like this, but you can get good night's sleep, you can get some exercise, you can eat healthy. It's really important to eat healthy, and you can try to stay relaxed, not stressed. These things, we really know that they help your immune system a lot. The other thing I'm showing you on the right is I'm showing you that in addition to washing your hands and covering the cough, you have different ways to humidify those mucous membranes of yours, those mucosal membranes. So you can have a humidifier, you can drink some warm tea, you can even use steam to really try to let that humidity get in. And as the temperature gets warmer, and this is already, going to be helpful as well, because cold air just doesn't really hold a lot of humidity in it, and it's very, very dry. So I'm now going to open up to questions, and I want to hear what you guys want to know.
Wonderful. We have a couple questions. One of them was from one of the students, and they asked, why did they hear on the news that children and elderly are at risk before?
So for a lot of viruses that we're used to looking at, like flu, very young kids and the elderly are the most susceptible. That's usually how it happens. For coronavirus specifically, it's really with increasing age, you're at more risk. And there are some other diseases that if you had them, they would set you at an increased risk. But luckily for this infection, kids are really doing very well. So even very, very young kids are overcoming this very well.
That's awesome. One of our students was wondering if we can use the spelling mistakes or the mutations against the virus to help make a cure.
Well, I love that question. So what I want to show you guys is actually that when we first started to understand that we had human-to-human transmission in the United States, originally we thought we were just having some travel cases that had gotten the virus elsewhere, and then they came and they were being quarantined, and that we didn't have community spread. So we weren't infecting our neighbors. That's what we thought. But there was a study happening by scientists in Seattle. It was called the flu study, the Seattle flu study. And so they'd been collecting samples from a lot of people who had flu-like symptoms. And they had a bunch of people who they'd collected samples from who tested negative for the flu, but they had symptoms of flu. And they saved those samples. And as they started to get more and more worried about coronavirus, they started asking for permission to go back and test those samples for coronavirus. And when they did, what they found out, I'm showing you two arrows. So the first arrow on the left is pointing to USA, Washington 1. So the first case of coronavirus that we know was a travel case from China. We know that that sample was taken on, so in mid-January. And what happened is at the very end of February, this USA Washington 2, so the second arrow, this was a case of somebody who had never traveled, well, not recently. They hadn't gotten this virus anywhere else. So scientists looked at the sequence, they checked all the spelling mistakes, and they said, whoa, this matches the spelling mistakes of the very first Washington case. And what that probably means is that since that first case in Washington state, there has probably been other cases in Washington state that have been accumulating without us realizing it because we just weren't testing for them. We were assuming that the cases were only coming from travel. So that was actually a really dangerous assumption. And as they tested more and more cases, they found that they had this whole cluster of viruses in Washington state that all had the same spelling mutations. That means that they were all viruses that, you know, were very closely related and had been spreading from person to person in Washington state. And the last thing I'll show you about this is a website that you can actually explore. It's been amazing in this infection. Samples, as they're getting sequenced, so as we're knowing all of the spelling mistakes in there, they're getting uploaded to this website. And what you can see at the upper right is where it says explore the data yourself. So you can go to this link on the bottom left and you can play around with this data. You can see what it looks like. But I'm showing you on the map that you can see how this virus spread all around the world. And you can see which cases came from where. And on the left, you can see what that really looks like in terms of mapping out these mutations or spelling mistakes in the virus itself. All right, do you have any other questions?
We do have some more questions. One of our students asked how long the coronavirus can stay in the air after someone coughs.
Okay, that is a fantastic question. So it's a little bit complicated in that it depends how it got to the air. So for the vast majority of cases, when the coronavirus is in the air, it's in the air for a very short amount of time. Actually, let's go back to that slide about spread. Here we go. So you see the guys coughing. So those are little droplets. And those droplets, they don't go very far. And that's why we think about this staying 6 feet apart, because those droplets, they kind of fall to the ground pretty quickly. And so they don't stay in the air very long. But we are starting to realize that there is also some aerosol involvement here. So there can be little virus particles that do linger in the air for longer. But what we are most afraid of here is actually those droplets that fall. When they fall, the virus is still okay. And if they land on the table or the door handle or a window or something that you then touch, you could still get that virus particle on you and you could still bring it to your face and get infected. So it does matter if it's in the air, and that's why we're now asking people to wear masks. But it's also still very, very, very important to keep distance from people and to wash your hands, because those are really important ways that we're spreading this virus to each other.
When the kids go out and ride their bike and they're socially distancing, should they try to wear a mask then? Or since they're being far away from people, are they okay?
As long as they're keeping their distance, then it's really a personal choice, and you have to make sure that you're choosing a mask that you can breathe in really well, because you don't want the mask itself to give you problems. Where we really want people to be wearing a mask is if you're going to have to be around other people. Like if you're going into a grocery store, if you're going into a post office, if you're going, if you ordered takeout and you're going to pick it up. So if you are going to be around other people, then we would really want you to wear a mask. If you're out riding a bike all by yourself in a trail that there's nobody for miles, obviously wearing a mask or not wearing a mask doesn't matter. If you are riding a bike and you might, there might be people walking or you might encounter other people, then it would be safer to wear a mask.
Is there a time where
One thing I want to say is the mask is most important to protect other people from you, actually, because the droplets coming out of your mouth get trapped on that mask. It's not perfect at protecting you from other people, because things could still get in your eyes, things could still get in your hands. Don't think that if you're wearing a mask, you're not going to get sick. But if you are wearing a mask, you're going to do a really good job at helping not get other people sick if you happen to be sick and not know it yet.
it's a way to show kindness?
Yeah.
Is there a time when you need to have more than 6 feet distance?
Yeah, so unfortunately 6 feet is it's a number that if everything was droplets, that would be kind of a best guess scenario of about how far those droplets can get. But aerosol particles, they can linger for longer, and they can get farther. So 6 feet is a big help. It's not perfect. And if people are sharing the same room, especially if windows are closed and air isn't going anywhere, then yeah, 6 feet might not be far enough.
What if we're in something like a pool? How would that work in the summertime?
Okay, well, that's going to depend if the pool is indoors or outdoors. That's going to make a really huge difference. Because again, because of this air circulation, we're not expecting that this virus could survive the chlorination of the pool. So that's not a major concern if the pool is chlorinated. But the concern is that everybody's got their head outside of the water, and if we get too close together, we could spread this. So that would be the main concern.
Great. And we had another question back when we were looking at your slides about the purple spider-looking germ. They wanted to know specifically what that was in comparison to the other one. Yes, that one.
All right. So the one on the left, these are both types of viruses. One on the left is called a bacteriophage. So it's a virus that infects bacteria. And it does it where it uses those spider legs to hang on. And then like a needle, it injects this recipe book inside for the bacteria to just start making tons of little viruses. The virus on the right is a flu virus. That one infects your cells. So that's actually trying to get into your lungs and have you cough it out to other people and get them infected. So the difference between these two viruses is if they infect bacteria or if they infect what we call mammalian cells, so human cells or other mammals.
Wonderful. We had a question about school. When the kids are able to go to school, they've heard that things might look different. Do you have any information on that?
I wish I did. Are you guys wanting to go back to school? Is everybody excited to go back to school? So in a lot of places, like I'm in California, and we already know that we're not going back to school this year. And I know that some other states have, are thinking along those lines as well. So we don't really know when all you guys are going back to school and what it's going to look like. And what's going to be the biggest thing that we're still trying to figure out is what will be the most people, the biggest number of people that we allow to be in the same room at the same time. Because the more people we have in a small amount of space, especially if it's indoors, the more chances that one of them is sick and doesn't know it and could get all these other people sick. So it's a big recipe for spread. So the smaller we keep those numbers of how many people could be together in a closed space, the lower the chance is that one of them is sick. So these are the kinds of things that a lot of people are trying to figure out right now about what those limits are going to be and when it's going to be safe to go back, and what it's going to look like when we do. You guys might be wearing masks. That's a real possibility when you go back to school.
That's great. Well, I'll have to get new fancy back to school masks.
Exactly. You could have it matching your backpack, your lunch bag.
What about cats and dogs? Can they be carriers of COVID-19?
So we don't have very good evidence for dogs. It is clear that cats can catch this. And it's more likely for younger cats than for older cats. There was a very famous cat that got infected at the Bronx Zoo, a big, big cat. So it's not just house cats. But yes, cats can get this. We are not sure if cats can give it to humans, but we are sure at this point that humans can give it to cats.
It looks like one of the other callers was on one of my other calls and knows that some of the labs are shut down and some scientists are working from home. They were wondering if people are still working on the virus even though some of the labs are shut down.
It's true. So you know how all these scientists from all over the world have been saying from the very beginning, from January and February, we've been saying everybody needs to stay home. And they've been listening to themselves as well. A lot of scientists around the world shut down their own labs. Even though we all think we work on really important stuff, we thought it was more important that everybody stay home and that everybody just has to take a little break from what they're working on. At a lot of different universities, including the university that I work at, Stanford, the only people who are going into lab right now are people who are working on this virus and this disease. And that's true at a lot of places. So a lot of the science that's happening right now is all happening around this. And what's really cool about that is that we've got a lot of different scientists all over the world who are really bored right now, and they're all thinking about the same problem. And so people are thinking about it from all these different angles. And so the people who have always worked on coronaviruses, they're so busy and overwhelmed, and they're trying to run so many different tests that everybody's thinking up. But we have a lot of other scientists kind of trying to jump in and help out and bring in their perspective. And that's been great because we have engineers who are helping us make better masks. And we have people who think about how can we reuse the masks we have? How can we clean them of virus and use them again? Because we don't have enough masks for the healthcare workers. So we have lots of different scientists and engineers thinking about the same problem, but from very, very, very different approaches and ways of thinking. And so that's been really, really incredible to see.
I love that about science too. One of the students was wondering how long do you think we're going to have to be maintaining the 6 feet away from people?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question, and we really don't know. So here's the thing, is that in a lot of places in the United States, we've reached that peak, and maybe we're slightly post-peak. The problem is that at the peak, that's when the most people around you are infected. And if we stay flat from there, like you may have heard so much about flatten the curve and bring down the peak and things like that. But the problem is that flat means we're still staying at that very high number. So we're not continuing to go up and have even more. It's all about how many people would one sick person infect. So let's say I'm sick. And let's say that I infect 2 or 3 other people. Well, that very quickly escalates because let's imagine it's two. Let's say I'm sick, I infect two people, they each infect two people. So now there's 4 people, then 8, then 16. It very quickly becomes this huge number. And that's what we were seeing happening. We managed to slow that down so that every day we've got a similar number of cases to the day before, or maybe even a little bit less. There's still a lot of cases every day, a lot of new cases. So we're certainly not yet at the point where we can just go back to school. Because if we do that, the cases are just gonna take off again. And the doctors just won't have enough resources, enough time to take good care of everybody. We don't want that to happen. So we really want to take good care of ourselves, each other, and our doctors. And we want to stay home for now. We will need to get to the point that there's hardly any new cases per day before it's really safe to go back out again. And every state will probably decide this for themselves. But hopefully states will wait until the point where there's very few new cases and where we have the ability to test everybody and to find every case as it happens and to tell them to stay home.
We had one last question about if COVID-19 will change the way that someone looks.
That's a really interesting question. So somebody who gets a really bad case of COVID-19 may be dealing with that for a long time. The recovery may take a while. It doesn't seem to be changing too much of somebody's outer appearance, but the way that somebody breathes, what their lungs look like, how quickly they get short of breath, so like how long they can run for and things like that, some of that might take a long time to come back to normal. Luckily, kids aren't having a lot of that, but as you see people who are older and older and grandparents, you see a lot more of that, and that can take a long time to recover from. Some people are getting certain types of rashes, but those seem to clear. So it doesn't look like this will actually change how you look, other than that you're going to be wearing a mask. That's going to stay for a while.
There was one extra question that just came through about antibodies. Mm-hmm. And they were wondering if your body has antibodies from having the virus previously, does that mean you're immune to the virus for your whole life or several years, or how long will that help you?
Okay. So when I talked about the B cells and said they could shoot out darts, those darts are really antibodies. And those antibodies, they could be binding to that spike protein on the outside of the virus. And if they did that, they'd be something we'd call neutralizing antibodies. It's like if you've ever heard of like neutralizing an enemy. So antibodies, they can neutralize a virus and they can stop it in its tracks. If you're really lucky and you've made a very good immune response and you've got neutralizing antibodies, then you're good, probably for a little while at least. We know that other coronaviruses that cause the common cold, for example, we can get them again and again. So we have these really great antibodies, but then we lose them over time, and the virus changes enough that it manages to trick us into getting sick with it again. But we're not sure if that's going to happen for this or not. We're not sure how long those antibodies are going to be protective. We are very hopeful that a lot of people are going to make good antibodies, and they are going to be protected at least for the next year or so to let us get over this current thing. But what we're really trying to do, and the safest way to get antibodies, will be if we can make sure we have a really safe vaccine. And the whole point of that vaccine would be to get you really, really good neutralizing antibodies and T cells that are really quick to recognize this. So that's what we're trying to do, get you all protected with good antibodies through a vaccine, hopefully.
We have another question from someone in California, and they were wondering, what stage would you consider us to be at within the process of being in the clear?
Okay, well, California is a big state, and we've got different pockets of infection. So we've got what we call the Bay Area, and we've got the LA area, and they've got kind of different patterns going on. In terms of the Bay Area, kind of got this early and has been managing to keep this kind of under pretty tight wraps and very well controlled over time. Whereas LA kind of started to have a little peak there, and they're doing much better because everybody's doing a really good job of staying in place and staying isolated. But they definitely had a much bigger problem and reached a higher peak than in the Bay Area. So it kind of depends where you are in California, but California overall is doing really well in flattening the curve. And as long as we keep staying home and isolating, we're doing pretty good in terms of number of cases. We are not yet at that point where we're down to very low cases and have the capability to case trace everybody, but a lot of cities are working on it. So I've heard that San Francisco is really working to get that capacity, where they're going to have the testing capability and they're going to have the ability to track down every case. So as different places get to that kind of capability, they'll be able to start thinking about opening back up.
And are there any cures or solutions for COVID-19 yet?
Well, there's a lot of people working on different medicines, different solutions. Unfortunately, what's working the best is that we all just keep physical distance from each other and keep isolating. That's working the best to cut down spread. If people are getting sick, hospitals are getting better and better at helping people get through this and find things that are working. But there's no magic drug for this. Unfortunately, there's no magic spell. Nothing is really just making this go away. A lot of people are getting very sick and just having to do that hard work of recovering and getting better in the hospital. But we're definitely working on it, and there's a lot of things we're hopeful about that will hopefully really be able to stop this virus in its tracks. So hopefully coming soon.
That's what everyone's working for. I love it. Well, we really appreciate all your time, Dr. Tal. I know I feel better knowing one of the COVID-19 helpers, and we just really enjoyed you being with us and taking the time to explain how everything is working and what process we're at right now with our solution. We have a webinar every week, and our webinar next week is going to be on Thursday at 1. So my friends that are on the call, I will email you and let you know about who the call is next week. And I wanted to, again, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with our students and tell them more about COVID-19 and where we are in the process.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everybody. Stay healthy and
Bye.
keep everybody around you safe. Yes,
definitely. Stay kind, everybody. Wash your hands.
And use your superpowers for good.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.